Well, thank you very much to talk with us. So first, can you talk a little bit about your work as an artist?
Just a little bit.
Just
I
a
don't know
little
if I
bit.
can. But just a little bit.
Well, I have to say that I was very curious to see that your work is, as I saw it, it's a little bit like you are putting in question the ideals a little bit about the French Revolution. I mean, the idea of the liberty, the idea of the beauty, the idea of equality in the projects that you are doing. And I find it very interesting in the two documentaries that you did about the beauty contest. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, my background is as a theater director. I educated as a theater director, so I come from the world of the stage. I guess quite a while ago I kind of grew bored with what I perceived as the limitations or the predictability of just being inside a theater building. It's it's a bit like the difference between watching football and playing football.
Yeah.
Watching football can be interesting if it's like a world championship, but usually I like more playing football myself. So being inside a comfort zone of the mainstream theater wasn't really, felt like it was too much remote from the real world, literally speaking. So I started experimenting with bringing the techniques and the philosophy of the world as a stage, if you want, into the world outside. So the first really big project of that kind, I guess, was Miss Landmine, which was a beauty pageant for landmine injured women, which I first prepared and then organized in Angola in Southwest Africa in 2008. The year after in Cambodia in Southeast Asia. And those two countries are really very different from each other, but they have the same problem, which are a lot of landmines left in the ground after a long civil war. And that's also probably why, even if it was the same idea, the same concept, the same brand if you want, the project turned out very differently in those two countries, which also taught me a lot, that you don't really need to have a new idea for each new project as long as you work outside in the real world, because the real world will always be your co-director, and it will give you a lot of unexpected material that can become part of your performances, as long as you are not afraid of the unpredictable, as long as you are prepared to roll with the punches, as they say.
When did you get noticed that the idea of suspense it will be so important in the realization of this kind of projects?
And by suspense, you mean?
Suspense as this kind of tension before the action happens, and you didn't know what is going to be the final result.
I think that was a gradual process, but for instance, if you take Miss Landmine, which on one level you could say it was a really simple idea, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It was like a really clear, simple idea of turning attention to the landmine issue. But then, when we announced the project, we made it public, both in the countries where it took place, but just as much in the global media discourse, if you like. The perception or the reception of that project was, among other things, a huge discussion about how many people were provoked because me, as a white male from a rich country like Norway, presented poor black women or yellow women from Cambodia in this presumably exploitative way. And that led me again to, I didn't really plan for that perception of the work, but it opened up a huge and very, very interesting and important new discussion, which became much more complex and much more interesting than the original intention. Because everybody agrees that landmines are bad.
Yes.
Even landmine producers agree that landmines are bad. But the discussion of power structures, identity, me as white male, them as brown female, poor, rich, colonialism, or white guilt about the past, combined with quite a lot of humanitarian Samaritans who got very, very angry on behalf of these women. And not very many people asked these women directly, what do you think? Because the women themselves thought it was a great project. They really enjoyed taking part. So that also opened up a lot of new issues. And again, led to another project which I did, because I got quite a good insight into the world of international aid, since I tried to collaborate with quite a number of aid organizations operating in both Cambodia and Angola into realizing this landmine, and none of them wanted to take part in it. But still, I hung out quite a lot with aid workers and saw how most international aid looks and how it works on the ground. So that got me into investigating and questioning, the international aid. So a new project was born out of the experiences of this landmine project. And the new project was called Pimp My Aid Worker, where I went to Zambia in Southern Africa and recorded a reverse charity music video where African pop stars sang for the benefit of Western aid workers. And which again, you could say was a quite simple idea, but which also released a lot of, I think, it allowed a lot of people to start to think about and talk about an issue which up to them had been a bit in the closet. Yeah, so I guess those are two examples.
So how did these examples prepare you for the Korean adventure? Because you had been there like how many times? 17?
Yeah, now it's more like 20, I think.
Like 20 times, and you have done already another documentary before the Laibach documentary. So how did you find that there is like a very small way from thinking to doing it, or do you find it more difficult? Which are like the difference between the projects when you arrived to Korea?
I definitely started going to Korea with a certain confidence which I had learned through these previous projects that I told you about. With a certain confidence that I have experience in working, in realizing artistic interventions or artistic projects, collaborating with people and with participants where almost nobody have background in the arts as such. Real people. So, which is definitely a huge advantage that you have to be able to talk in normal language. You cannot take for granted, as you can if you operate mainly inside the established art structures. You always have a common language, you have common points of reference and so on, which can be wonderful, and it can be like a vacation just to speak the same language. But if you are going to work as in the more, you could say, activist or socially oriented specter of staged performance projects, you definitely need to have a language to be able to explain to people who don't have any artistic references and who are maybe also not interested in arts as such. So this I definitely had. Another thing is that you have to have an interest. You have to have an active interest in the place you are going. You have to read up on history, not only from one source, because history is
Yes, and they are merely
selective.
ways to understand it.
So, and if you have the time, learn a little bit of language from the place you're going. It doesn't have to be that much. It can just be to say cheers, or you have a great ass. But it breaks a lot of ice. So small things like that, just to show people that you're not coming there as totally ignorant of them and their place. Also, I had taught a lot, as we were talking about earlier, that if you work within the field of artistic interventions in the outside world, you cannot let yourself be stopped by events taking another turn than what you had expected. Quite on the contrary, you have to take it as a challenge. How can I continue this idea, even though the Prime Minister just put a ban on our project and told me to leave the country, which has happened, by the way, not in North Korea, but in Cambodia. How can I continue the project and find a form that incorporates what just happened, or whatever happens, and still takes the projects further? And if you develop a way to do that, you basically cannot fail, because whatever happens will be material. Yeah, will be material for your for whichever final form your idea is going to take. And I think it's also quite significant that most of the larger projects I do usually have more than one format, more than one manifestation. Like, for instance, the Laibach concerts, which are, of course, the concert in itself, but it's also the documentary, and it is the debate, the discourse around the whole event. And it's also, us going to South Korea next week is also a beautiful example of how one thing leads to the other. Because the reason Laibach is going to North Korea is because the movie has been selected to a big film festival in South Korea. And then I suggested to the festival that would you like something extra? So then again, you really come into kind of a synergy, which basically the show doesn't end until you decide it ends.
When did you decide that you were going to do this collaboration with Laibach? Unique, because as I understand, you have the idea that you were going to do a kind of interventions with other artists to go to North Korea and do like a camp. And then it happened that you only took Laibach and did the concert.
Yeah, that's true. Originally, I was planning to coincide the Laibach concert with a visual arts seminar that I've been planning to do for several years. And the North Koreans were totally okay with that. But it was actually me who saw, and I thank Buddha and Allah and God and everybody for realizing that in time, that it would kill us if we tried to do those things at the same time. It would be just the Laibach concert itself was so much work, especially with all the media attention around it, but the organizational aspect of it was really, really a lot of work. So that was my personal decision. That I said that, okay, so let's postpone the visual arts project a year or two and then just concentrate on the Laibach concert.
And how was your approach to Laibach to tell them, like, let's do this together?
It was pretty logical. I mean, if you work with Laibach and you work with North Korea, you almost have to repress that idea. It's so obvious. But if you're asking how did I and Laibach meet each other, I was a huge Laibach fan in especially the late 1980s and 1990s when I was young and formative. They really have meant a lot for my way of thinking about and practicing arts in general. So in a way it's like repaying artistic debt. But then they approached me some years ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and asked me if I wanted to direct The Whistleblowers, which was the first music video for their sort of comeback album, Spectre, in 2014, which I did, which came out quite nice. And both sides wanted to work together some more, and it was at that point, since I already at that point had been directing ever bigger collaborations with North Korea for the last 2-3 years. It was, like I said, it was an idea that thought itself.
What do you think it was your biggest challenge during their staying over, doing the concert and everything that we couldn't see in the documentary?
The biggest challenge was I don't remember it being that challenging on any other level than the workload itself. Kind of keeping a firm grip, making sure that everybody kept a good spirit, because it could very easily have become quite ugly because everything was so difficult and it was so many misunderstandings along the way and so on. So I had to motivate both the Laibach side and the North Korean side that, come on, no, everybody we have to do, we're in this together, we need to do our best together. This is a unique situation for everybody involved. This is the first time anybody tries something like this. Let's do this. And of course, having to be there for any kind of negotiation or just keeping my hands above it all the time. But that wasn't so much like a mental challenge. It was more the sheer workload of it. The biggest challenge was to make it happen at all in advance, to make the North Koreans actually agree to invite him back. Since quite a lot of people ask, how did the North Koreans know about Laibach? And they didn't. Of course. This was entirely up to me personally asking my partners in North Korea if they would like to try to invite a band from the outside. And then they asked, do you have any ideas? And I said, yeah, I have a band that might interest you. So, and that process took maybe 1 year of back and forth, of explaining and persuading, and even then it really very nearly went to hell several times. So that was the biggest challenge. So mentally, once we arrived to North Korea and we were on the ground, I wasn't really that worried about will it happen or not, because at that point it had already gone so far that it would just have made even the North Koreans look silly if they had called it off.
So, when where was the first place that you realized the documentary, and how was the reaction the first time that you saw it in the big screen?
We had a kind of a sneak premiere in Norway, since the main financing of the film comes through me, through my financing from Norway. In Oslo, at the festival called Films from the South in October last year. But the world premiere was at IDFA in Amsterdam, the world's biggest documentary festival, 3 weeks later in November. So, and what was special with the IDFA premiere was that we did a Laibach concert directly after the movie, in the same place also, which was quite spectacular. But it was like the Oslo screening that kind of, reassured us that people were really getting the film, that it spoke to people, and I must say very and also I must say that it was really great to experience that the tone which we have set for the movie, which is a kind of light-hearted, not like, I would definitely not say it's superficial, but we kind of we let people early in the film, through this John Oliver clip, for instance, that opens the film, we let people understand that hey, it's okay, you can laugh, even if it's about serious subject like North Korea. You can laugh along the way.
So, one last question. How do you feel showing here in Guadalajara, and how do you perceive the reaction of the people?
It was so beautiful to show it here. Both the screenings I attended in Guadalajara, I know there are lots of other screenings all over Mexico which I won't be able to attend, but it was such enthusiastic and engaged and responsive crowd. People didn't want to leave the Q&As afterwards, and they were like really beautiful experience in both places. So it people seem to be getting it in Mexico too.
That's great. So a lot of vlogs in Korea next week, and thank you very much.
Thank you.